Radio Freedom. You've got it because we've got it, and we are you, being joined now by the mayor of Inglewood. He's had that position since 2011. He's in his third term, but he's had a lot of jobs before that. 19 years in the Inglewood Police Department, rose to the rank of deputy chief. He was the chief of police for the city of Santa Monica and assistant general manager for LA World Airports, in charge of public safety and counterterrorism. Mayor James Butts Jr., good morning.
Good morning, Dominique.
Busy time for you. You're, of course, known for the incredible success you've had in the city of Inglewood as far as the economic development, bringing the sports teams, all of these, various projects that are springing up, the Girl Scouts, and more to come. And this is an economic crisis for us coming out of COVID. But I know as a former chief of police, you also have a lot to say about George Floyd.
I do indeed. Where to start? Now, the reality is that the George Floyd situation is just the exclamation point to a long-running movie that has been going on for the 37 years I was in law enforcement and the 9 years I've been mayor. So think about this. I was one of the first African Americans in Inglewood Police Department, a city that was going through the transition of white flight and the integration of black residents on top of an extremely racist police department. I accelerated in that department with a goal of making sure that people that look like me and the Hispanics that were not hired as yet would have opportunities that were afforded to others that applied for those jobs. Went into Santa Monica, hired at the age of 37 to a department that was about 85-90% white males, and had an extreme problem with the use of deadly force, particularly against minorities. To reform that department and having to bridge the current reality and the ignorance of what was going on in law enforcement by a small subset of officers and change things without destroying the fabric of the organizations. And so I've lived this saga for well over 40 years. And so then we come to the George Floyd situation, where everything boils over because there's an 8-minute plus video of someone being basically tortured and asphyxiated in broad daylight in front of dozens of witnesses, with people screaming to please let him up. He's handcuffed. And it took that before everyone, and I mean everyone in this world, because there are demonstrations in continents throughout and countries throughout the globe. It took all that before people said, oh, this is what African Americans, blacks, have been talking about. But see, that one incident focuses everything on police departments. And then that officer and those officers become emblematic to people of what they think all police officers are, and nothing could be further from the truth. Those are a small subset of the officers in this country. However, if you allow them to run wild and untethered, they have a dramatic impact on the lives and futures of blacks. And I say that because police officers cause people to be entered into the criminal justice system. And within the criminal justice system, the police, the prosecutors, and the judges, there are others that have those feelings. And so if a police officer can decide, if you get into the system and now are subject to the unlimited resources of the state to prosecute you, you can be forced to plead guilty to a lesser offense in fear of getting the time for this greater offense that you've been arrested for. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough. And there are so many black families that know the pain of having a relative incarcerated.
No doubt.
And put into the system by people with the feelings of the Minneapolis officers.
Well, maybe we need to get rid of the Cal Gang system, the database.
Absolutely we do.
Okay. I didn't expect you to agree with me on that, but I do think we need to do that. I know you think it's, that subset of officers, and I don't want to have, turn into a discussion about whether it's systemic or whether it's bad apples. But I know for sure that your solution is extreme accountability.
First of all, it is systemic.
Oh, okay.
It is systemic.
You're on one today, Mayor Butts.
Okay. Because the whole system has to be adhered to. You see, if you recruit scrupulously, if you train your people vigorously, if you monitor them relentlessly, and you discipline them responsibly and weed out the aberrant personalities, then you will have a good system. And the reality is that there are departments that have proven that. We've proven that here in Inglewood over the last 7 years of the chief that we have in office now. We did it in Santa Monica. We went from spending $3.5 million a year when I got there on use of force cases and deadly force, $3.5 million on average a year, to the final year I was there, we spent $1,849 on total police liability with no shootings. So it can be done, but first of all, the people that pick chiefs, mayors, city council people, they have to gain an understanding of their responsibility in selecting who they pick. And the problem is you have people who know nothing about police work selecting police chiefs because they like the way they do an interview, and then not holding them accountable for outcomes. You shouldn't select chiefs and keep them in office because of their aspirations. They need to be held accountable for outcomes. And if they don't have good outcomes, they need to go.
All right. Well, it sounds like you would, impanel maybe a group of experts or something to choose police chiefs. I think that's an interesting concept. When I go to these phones, Mayor James Butts, as usual, lots of folks on the line. Gwendolyn from Compton, you're on with Mayor Butts on the front page, Saturday edition. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. My question, I have a statement and a question. No one's mentioned about these retired police officers, whether they forced or retired during time, carrying weapons. There should be some kind of law or something to keep them from carrying weapons in public places. And secondly, I thought I would like to know the difference between the police officer and a person serving in the Army during the time of a crisis.
Those are great questions, Gwendolyn. Thank you. So, what about cops that carry guns when they're retired or off duty? Does there need to be more restriction?
First of all, if I'm being held up in a street robbery and there's a retired police officer that has a firearm, I'm going to be a lot happier with the potential outcome than I am if it's just another person getting robbed with me. And as far as the difference,
I'll be more happy if I have the firearm, but because you don't know which way that cop is going to, break. And if you're black, it might not be in your favor.
You see, Dominique, now what you're doing, you're revealing a prejudice and bias that we are.
No, I'm revealing a data-based concept.
You're revealing a bias that we are fighting worldwide to stop generalizing and being prejudiced. I will tell you, I was in law enforcement for 37 years. The overwhelming majority of police officers are decent people. The problem is
that I believe
is that the subset of aberrant personalities of people with racial biases have been allowed to operate pretty much unfettered.
And in the system, I mean, but we already talked about that. So your response to Gwendolyn is you don't think that type of law is necessary or even a good idea.
It's not a good idea. That's why that's the social purpose in letting retired officers carry concealed weapons is twofold. One, they've arrested and incarcerated a number of people, and so they are for life at risk to a certain degree. And secondly, you would rather have people that have law enforcement training out in the community and available to help when necessary. And as far as
I feel like if that's the case, then they have to be held even more accountable. And I don't know that that's really a prejudice. I mean, if I'm generalizing, I apologize.
You are.
But I'm thinking about Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, the guy that shot him dead was a retired police officer with a gun, you know?
And he was a redneck racist, and he should never have been a police officer. So we get back to the circular argument.
Got it. Okay, and what about these military police? I mean, this is more of an issue in Washington, D.C., where the black mayor there has had to, fight with directly with the president about having the Army, having these military men who, are from random agencies of federal police enforcement. She's, I guess, asking what's the difference.
Dominique, under no circumstances are people of the American military supposed to be pressed into service to control or suppress citizens of the United States of America. That is without argument, and it's wrong.
Got a lot of folks that want to talk to you, Mayor James Butts Jr. Got to throw this one in, though. I know you know that this program is one of our sponsors is Councilmember Herb Wesson, and he has been formulating something along with the current Council President Nury Martinez about a people's bailout. I mean, we look at these multiple crises that were under COVID, our usual unemployment crisis now exacerbated by that, and then, whatever the fallout is of our rebellion right now. How do we bounce back as African American people? What is the true way to bail the people out in this time?
The true way to bail the people. That's an interesting concept, because the federal government has already injected $2 trillion or more into stimulus and recovery.
But most of it to corporations, right?
You're cutting me off.
Interject.
Okay. And the problem is the selection of the entities that receive that money. And the concept is still the Reagan trickle-down formula. While it is important to make sure the entities that create and sustain jobs can continue on, there are people that have to live day to day and month to month. And there's also the social dynamic. There needs to be more money put into support for families and childhood development and support for the family structure, particularly for populations like blacks that have had to endure 400 years of slavery and all the dysfunctionalities that would come from being made free but not being made whole. And that has never been done. And there are definite, I don't want to sound radical, but there's still reparations to be made.
I think you make a lot of powerful points when you talk about, focusing on services, focusing on things that help families. Are you talking about on the city level, like city bailouts, or are you talking about federally on the state level? I mean, certainly I know city budgets are strained right now, and people are talking about defunding police departments.
Okay. First of all, the concept that a city has the surplus funding to engage in these types of programs is just pure fantasy. Most cities live on a shoestring budget. Most cities have very little in the way of reserves. They have no way of funding this. This is something that needs to be done at the state and federal level. And it's just inconceivable that you would say that a city like say the city that's talking about doing this, that continuously has multi-million deficits, will be able to reprogram money to accomplish necessary social reparations. The cities don't have that.
So we're talking about cities executing something that has to be funded on a federal level or a state level.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's go to Eddie from Glendora. Eddie's been holding on for a bit. Eddie, thank you for your patience.
How you doing? Good morning,
good.
Dominique.
Welcome.
And good morning, Mayor. The problem when it comes to policing is that, first of all, they like to rough up people all the time, especially after someone has stopped and not even fighting anymore. They feel like it's okay and they have the right to rough people up. And I'm also amazed how everybody seemed to be surprised by this cop putting his knee in the guy's neck. I've been seeing that for 40 years. Cops been doing that. All of a sudden, it's like the media and some of these so-called civil rights leaders are surprised by seeing that. It's been going on for decades, maybe even longer than that. And also when it comes...
All right, Eddie, let's have him respond. Let's have him respond to your thought there.
Okay, Eddie, I spent 37 years in law enforcement. And let me tell you this, without equivocation. Yes, when officers are dealing with someone that is combative and they are attempting to handcuff that person, yes, they do put their knees in the subject's back. Yes, they do cover the subject's legs while they're attempting to handcuff them. It is not ubiquitous to put a knee on someone's neck or throat area. It's dangerous. It should be considered an application of deadly force. And so I would disagree with you. I have not seen that as a ubiquitous tactic.
So should chokeholds of any kind be banned?
Chokeholds of all kinds should be banned. Chokeholds are those that restrict airflow into the lungs by placing pressure on the trachea. You can crush someone's trachea easily, and you can kill them easily. So chokeholds should be banned. But there's a difference between chokeholds and carotid restraints. Carotid restraints apply pressure on either side of the neck, which interrupts the blood flow to the brain. And within 7 to 8 seconds, a person would be rendered unconscious. I find it disturbing that elected people are talking about banning the carotid restraint because it should be considered a level of deadly force because someone could die if it was applied too long. However, if you have someone like, we used to deal with people on PCP in the 80s, and they had superhuman strength. And so your choice was either to beat them to death with batons, shoot them, or try to institute a carotid restraint and render them unconscious. And there are so many people that are alive today because the carotid restraint was available. It should be considered a level of deadly force. But when you have people that have never been in law enforcement starting to prescribe what tools are no longer available, then they have to be accountable when more people are beaten with batons unnecessarily or shot to death, because a police officer cannot lose a hand-to-hand fight with someone because they have a firearm at their side. And if they get relieved of their firearm, they'll easily be killed. And so there needs to be an understanding that what we're dealing with is a control and selection of police officers and not a unilateral dictation of what tactics and tools are available and that should be used properly.
Let's go to Kevin from Los Angeles. Good morning, Kevin. You're on with Mayor James Butts on the front page.
Hi, good morning, Dominique and Mayor James Butts. Okay, I know you've been in law enforcement for 37 years, and you were describing about this Derek Chauvin person. But I would propose to you that there's other Derek Chauvins that are out there.
There's a whole bunch of them
right now, and then how to isolate somebody like that, because he was the lead police officer for these other three.
Right. So, Kevin, we're up against the clock here. What's your question exactly?
My question is, how do you identify somebody like that? Because ultimately, he's going to cost the police department all this money.
I have a quick answer for you. Listen, everybody in that department, up to the chief of police, knew that this was a problem person. People like this get complained about. Sometimes supervisors don't even forward the complaints up the chain. But everyone in that department knew what he was capable of, and it was a failure of the command from his supervisor on up to the chief of police to eliminate him from service. That's what the tragedy of all this is, that a department that did not do its basic job, and that's to select and retain only the best, caused this to happen.
Mayor Butts, do you agree with President Barack Obama's panel on 21st century policing when they said that decisions whether or not to prosecute cops should go out of the district attorney's office and into an independent panel of prosecutors?
The only reason to prosecute police officers?
Yeah.
No. Are you talking about investigate police officers internally?
Investigate and handle those cases.
I don't agree with that at all as far as the investigation, because what you're saying is you're giving up and saying, well, I'll offload the responsibility to effectively manage and inspect police departments from the people that are paid good money to do it to people outside the department.
Okay, what about the prosecution?
The prosecution, of course.
You take it out of the DA's hands?
I don't know. It depends on the DA's performance. If you have a DA that consistently does not prosecute police misconduct, of course you should. But then again, if that's the case, again, you're letting someone off the hook. You're not electing the right person. You're not selecting the right person. And that's where... Back
to voting.
It's back to voting.
Yeah, back to voting.
And back to voting for the right people that have the expertise to do the things that you know need to be done.
You know, before we run out of time, I have to ask you this, Mayor Butts. You've had incredible success here in the city of Inglewood, you know, as far as the economic piece, developing not just buildings and businesses, but also, you know, job opportunities for people. How can the city of Inglewood support, you know, African Americans, as we've seen unemployment go down, but African American unemployment go up? And so many of us are independent workers, gig workers who don't have that health care, you know, actors and hairstylists and the like. What can Inglewood do about that? And what advice would you give to our other mayors?
Okay, first of all, every single development that's of any size or stature in a city, in the development agreement, there needs to be a local hire goal. In every development agreement we have with the people that want to do business here, there's a 35% local hire goal. And that's resulted in our unemployment rate dropping from 17.5% to 4.7% for Inglewood residents. That's in less than 9 years. That's an incredible feat because we have the lowest unemployment rate for a minority majority city in the state of California. So when you say, what can you do? You can make people that do business in your city be part of the solution.
Mayor James Butts, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for always being a partner to KJLH.
I love coming here, Dominique.
All right, when we continue, we'll be talking with Mayor Raz Baraka. The city of Newark, New Jersey also happens to be my brother. And we're so pleased to be partnering with Council President Emeritus Herb Wesson, the city of Los Angeles, Community Build, and the Independent Professionals Association at indiework.org. We are live from the 1-800-THE-LAW 2 studio, Radio Free 102.3 KJLH.